Welcome back to the SpaceInfo Club. Today we have a very special guest, one of the UK leading voices in astrophysics and space exploration. Professor Martin Barstow is a professor of astrophysics and space science at the University of Leicester and the director of the strategic partnerships at Space Park Leicester. Over his remarkable career, he's been involved in some of the NASA and ESA most iconic missions, from the Hubble Space Telescope to the James Webb Space Telescope, and now the next great observatory that could redefine our place in the universe, HWO, the Habitable Worlds Observatory. So, Professor Barstow, welcome on board. It's an honor to have you here. Before we dive into the future of space telescopes and the search for life beyond Earth, I'd love to start with your story. So thank you for being here, Martin, Professor Barstow. It's a pleasure also for me, because I wanted to have this conversation for a long time, because I'm very fascinated about the topics that we are going to talk today. And I would like to start from one of these topics, and it's let's say the journey from white dwarfs to the worlds, maybe some would say. So because some of our listeners may know that you started your career developing UV space instrumentation, and so this is the starting point, and how this path led you towards Hubble and James Webb and HWO.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Actually, something I haven't thought about for quite a while. So I started my career. I came to Leicester in 1979 to do a PhD in space astronomy, and as always, when you come to start a PhD, you're given a project.
Okay.
You don't really get to choose very often, but I was very lucky because I was given a project to build a telescope for a sounding rocket. And the role that Leicester were playing in this sounding rocket mission was to build the detectors.
Mhm.
And we were working jointly with MIT, who provided the telescope. So I didn't really have much idea of what astronomy to do at that time. But because I was handed this particular telescope, which was an extreme ultraviolet device, I had to try to work out what kind of science might be done with it. So that was where I got into studying white dwarfs and interstellar medium, because the white dwarfs are the brightest sources in the extreme ultraviolet. So it was quite pragmatic, really. Yeah, which are the brightest sources? Which things are we going to see with this telescope? Yeah, better learn about the white dwarfs. So that was the start of it all. And then we did fly the rocket, but it didn't work very well for all kinds of technical reasons. But the telescope that we developed became a satellite instrument on a mission called ROSAT. It was the ROSAT instrument was called the Wide Field Camera. And so instead of having 5 minutes in space that you get from a sounding rocket, we had an all-sky survey that lasted for 6 months, and then follow-up observations after that. So the wide field camera worked extremely well, and we discovered hundreds of sources, most of which were white dwarfs, and then had to come back and follow up on those sources. So I used IUE and eventually Hubble to do spectroscopy of those sources in the ultraviolet. So I got involved in Hubble because of that part of the program. And so it all built on that. Once you get into a mission, and Hubble is a public mission in the sense that anybody can apply for time.
Mm.
So I applied for time, and I won observing time on Hubble. And then people spot that you're winning observing time and say, okay, well, you're getting all this time. Why don't you come and do this for the project? So over time, you start to get pulled into doing things for the project. So for example, I sat on the allocation committees that give away the time. I became a member of a group called the Space Telescope Users Committee, which oversees what Hubble is doing and works with the project team to essentially make the mission operate in the best way it possibly can. So that's the sort of origin of getting into leadership roles, and then being an instrumental person. Uh, you've got your science. You start to think about, okay, what do we need to build next? Uh, how are we going to keep this science going? What comes after Hubble? And that's a really big challenge when a mission like Hubble has been so successful and also it's lasted for so long. People get used to having it
Mm.
and forget that all these things have a finite lifetime, and the lifetime could be, the mission could come to an end tomorrow. Hopefully not, but there's always the random chance that there'd be a meteorite impact that would damage it, or a piece of electronics would just fail from old age that would stop you using the telescope in the future. So that's how I got pulled into those later missions. I became involved in James Webb because I became the chair of the Space Telescope Institute Council, again through working on Hubble. And I applied to be involved in things like the Louvre project, which was essentially a, a planning phase for how do we do the next generation of space telescopes. And that led into Habitable Worlds Observatory.
Yeah, I see. Before going on, there is one, I would say, almost a personal curiosity, but I'm sure that the people who are listening and that are part of, let's say, what we do, usually are there are a lot of university students, and when I studied at the university, I developed, well, not me, together with the other guys in the team, we developed the also soundly rocket, and it was more on the, let's say, propulsion and let's say launch aspect more than on the payload. And I'm very curious because you could develop a telescope to be mounted on the sounding rocket, right? Did I understand
Yeah.
correct? Okay, but what can you observe while flying on a sounding rocket? I mean, usually it's not an orbital object, something that
Uh,
gets.
that's true. I mean, you don't stay in space,
Okay,
but NASA has a rocket program. We used to have a rocket program in the UK as well. And the agency provides essentially a system which is quite a large rocket, and the subsystems that allow you to operate your instrument in space, so pointing control,
okay.
communications, also a recovery system, like a parachute recovery system, so you can actually get your payload back and use it again. But these rockets are very powerful. They can lift about a ton, and they can get you up to altitudes of about 250 kilometers,
Okay.
a booster. So to do the science, you need to be, if you're observing in the EUV or the UV, you need to be above about 100 kilometers.
Hmm.
So if you have a peak altitude of 250, that gives you about 5 minutes above 100 kilometers. So you
Okay.
don't have long. You have to pre-plan your observations because you can't get there and then work out what you're going to do. You need to know exactly what you're going to do so that you don't waste any time. And then you have this very frantic period of 5 minutes where everything switches on and you have to check that everything's working. You might have to adjust the pointing to make sure you're looking at the right targets do that in real time. So it's a pretty frantic for 5 minutes. And then everything comes back into the atmosphere. You close up any doors that you've been opened. And then if you're lucky, the parachute opens up and you get everything back about 10 minutes later, uh, somewhere in the desert.
Mm.
It's a lot.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun. It's great training because you have to do everything for yourselves. So you learn a lot on the Sound and Rocket program. But it is hard to work out what science to do. So it's a good way of testing new ideas for instrumentation. So you do a bit of science and you prove your technology at the same time. And then if you're lucky, you move that technology onto a long duration satellite platform where you get a few years in space.
Okay. Yeah, this is really interesting. Also me personally. And as I said, a lot of people listening are university students, so it's a very good contact point in this sense. But from this, I would let's say I would turn out to I would say what some would define as career milestones at the Space Park Leicester, because one of the reasons we are talking today. And indeed, for people who still don't know, Space Park has become an hub for the UK space science. So since you helped developing it, what was your vision? And maybe it has changed in time.
It's certainly a career highlight. And the vision really comes from a bit of a change of direction. Uh, we talked about the science that I do and the space science
Mhm.
instrumentation, but as I became more senior, I was more and more involved in funding agencies, working with government bodies and things like that. When you get drawn into that kind of activity, you start to have to think about, okay, why is government spending money doing our science? What does the government think it wants to get out of it? And also, how do we actually link all the good ideas we have into improving how companies can work? You know, how can we improve economic growth? And so over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a very clear shift in the way government and scientists talk to each other about these things. It was always there. You know, government actually doesn't spend money on science just to do science. It spends money on science because it wants economic growth out of it.
Mhm.
It wants technology. It wants companies to make money. But it's now become a bit clearer and more explicit, and scientists are being asked to take this on board more and more. So when we were looking for, we were going through a period where science funding seemed pretty static and possibly even declining. And you have all these people working in Leicester, and you think, okay, how are we going to keep the show on the road
Mm.
if some of this money goes away? Uh, what do we need to do to broaden what we do? And I was actually set a challenge by the then Vice Chancellor of the university about, you know, space is one of our big things in Leicester. What are we going to do to keep it healthy? What are we going to do to grow? What are we going to do to essentially move forward? And I didn't do this entirely on my own. There were a lot of people I talked to in Leicester about it. And the consensus that we arrived at was that we should be doing more with business. We should think more about supporting business directly, working more closely with business, and also maybe even becoming subcontractor to businesses,
Mm.
and engaging businesses more closely and early on in things like our major space programs so that they get the opportunities that we get, and we can share facilities, share people, and hopefully get more mutual benefit from that whole activity. So Space Park really flowed from that idea. And if you're going to work with business, I've seen many university groups and people try to work with business, and it's actually quite hard. Uh, there are lots of science parks out there, but my experience is that the science parks are just collections of buildings with businesses in them. And the interaction between the academics and businesses is not very strong. So our aim with Space Park was to build a large facility and make it big enough so that individual businesses could actually come and live in the same facility as the academic scientists. So
Mhm.
they were side by side, sharing office space, seeing each other at coffee, at lunchtime, sharing lab space, and generally being more interactive, and hopefully uh, getting more fertilization of ideas between those two groups. I have to say it's still quite early, and I think it's an experiment that is still underway. I don't think I could declare whether or not it's a big success right now. I mean, the facility is a great success. We've attracted lots of businesses, and that's a success. But whether, you know, we'll be successful in getting that knowledge out there into industry more effectively, it's still a bit early for us to be able to say a lot about that. But it looks like it's going well.
Yeah, sure. Well, probably under, let's say, the business perspective, the time scale may be, let's say, reduced compared to, let's say, the space time scales we are used to, like decades, usually, something like that. So, yeah, probably, at least from my point of view, even though they can be reduced in that sense, probably it's too early. I don't know what you think.
I think there have been, well, you're right. The timescales in space and seeing the outputs can be quite long term. I think in this case, we hope to see things a bit more quickly than that because it's not about what we put in space so much as how the ideas and the technology we've got translate into supporting businesses
Okay,
and allowing them to develop new ideas and get new contracts. So this is more about the process than the end point. Uh, I think one of the things we can say is that we have created jobs. You know, there are a couple of hundred jobs that didn't exist before Space Park came into existence. Hopefully those will grow. It's a modest start, but we've only been open for 3 years uh, and fully active. So these things take time to build up.
sure. Yeah, and yeah, I would also link to this conversation the fact that I think more generally in let's say in the would say corporate approach or something like that, it's usually underestimated for sure. But at least also again, from my personal perspective, is something that I really value a lot, and it's the fact that having people who are capable of mentoring, giving you the right advice. Usually at the right time, but time is not usually a factor. But I mean, having mentors close to you is one of the most valuable thing that and people that you can have. Maybe you already have some insights, some I would say opinion on the people that are working with you and how they will carry on. Let's say your example, your leadership.
Well, I think we have a lot of people working in Leicester. There are about 300 people who actually work in space. So there's a lot of mentoring going on between people. Some of it's formal. We actually have formal mentoring schemes
Okay.
because we're a university, we're an academic institution. We have postdoctoral researchers, we have graduate students as well as undergraduates. So there's a lot of interaction, and I agree with you. Mentoring is really important, and it's about different generations working together and actually learning from each other. I don't think it's just about people who are towards the end of their careers handing on, this great experience to younger people. I think there's a lot to learn from younger people who come in with a different approach to life, uh, different views of technology, and offering different knowledge around, particularly around things like programming and systems. That for example, I don't know much about machine learning, and I've
Mhm.
learned about that from younger postdocs and students who actually developed programming in machine learning that supported some of the work that I do.
Yeah, the last thing that you said really, I would say, makes me think that this is one of the best hub to learn something because the fact that everyone can learn something from someone else, independently from his or her career, his or her achievements, it makes me really think that the Space Park is a knowledge hub more than anything else,
Yeah,
probably.
that's definitely the case, and we have lots of space-based courses in Leicester for students that feed into that. What I would say is it's a hub, but it's also a community,
Mhm.
and I think it's the community aspect that's really important, where people feel that they're all working together towards a set of common goals, and that everybody supports each other.
So far, we have explored Professor Bastow's personal background and career. So we talked about the beginning, then the career milestones, and also the milestones and the achievements at Space Park Leicester. So we also talked about mentoring, its importance, and the legacy. It's enough for today. So I remember to you that we have divided this interview into 3 parts. This was the first one. So thank you for being here. One last thing, don't forget to subscribe to the SpaceInfo YouTube channel to keep supporting. It's free for you, but means a lot for us. So see you next time with the second parts about HWO, science and vision.